I'm Chris St.Amand. I'm a debugger on the Microsoft.com operations debug team.
Ooh.
And
now, Microsoft.com, that's our homepage, right?
yeah, that's
and a bunch of other things too.
And all the Windows Update properties and the
which is one of the most visited websites in the world, right?
Yeah, it gets a lot of traffic from every Windows PC in the world. So
very cool. Can you talk about how much traffic you get?
I don't know what the exact
millions and millions.
Are, but I mean, it's when we release security patches and things like that, we push out gigabits per second of traffic, several gigabits.
Yeah.
I think the latest number was 10 to 15 gigabits per second that the download center was doing for the latest security.
And Channel 9's videos are up there too, so. No, none of you complain about the bandwidth I'm taking up. So.
That's probably
a lot of bandwidth.
Now, who are you?
I'm Jeff Stucky. I manage the debug team.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Wow. So, tell me a little bit about what you guys do. Because it's not just one page, right? Microsoft.com is thousands or hundreds of thousands of pages, right?
Actually, it's millions of pages.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's between 4 to 5 million pages, and that's just our one www site. Obviously, we have downloads and Windows Update and Windows Media and all kinds of other sites that have content. So it's a pretty large environment.
Wow. And can you tell me anything about the data center that this thing is in?
Yeah, we're actually spread out across multiple data centers for redundancy purposes. It's large building, lots of machines, lots of air conditioning.
Yeah. You guys ever go in there? Or?
We try not to, but every once in a while, if we have some hands-on work that we need to do, we'll go out there. But usually that's it's for experimental purposes. There are people that work in the facilities that do most of the day in, day out stuff.
Right. And so from your computer here, you can see the health of the network. And tell me about your daily job, because I have no concept of what it's like to run a major corporate website.
So our team specifically on the debug team, we're responsible for doing the early product adoption, testing out Longhorn. Right now that's one of the things we're working on is trying to test out that platform to see how it's going to perform under load when we get to start playing with it. And the other piece of it is actual break-fix debug work, where an application will break and we'll get an escalation to go in and attach a debugger and debug the application. Whether we're debugging an application that our developers wrote or the OS itself or a component of the OS is mainly what we're doing.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about is every page a separate app? When we go to Microsoft.com, what is happening? It's not a static site, right?
Right. There's thousands of applications on it, and it's broken out by. We have our own dev teams that build applications that our internal customers use, and we also have international subsidiaries that build their own applications. So if you go to Microsoft.com/China, that application is built by the China subsidiary, and they have their own apps that run under that vroot off of Microsoft.com.
Okay.
So it's a whole bunch of different groups all across the world publishing content and applications, and our own Microsoft.com dev teams as well that are building applications.
Right.
For our internal customers to consume.
Right.
So it's a lot of different dev teams, and they're all updating their applications 24 hours a day, and so we're pretty busy at times.
Yeah. Now I heard recently you guys moved over to 64-bit, right?
Yeah, that was.
Now, how much of Microsoft.com is running on 64-bit machines?
Right now, www.microsoft.com is on the 64-bit machines, and the downloads.microsoft.com is also running 64-bit. And
what did you get out of that? What happened when you turned on 64-bit?
It was pretty big for us. I mean, we spent a lot of time. Over the last 5 years on the 32-bit platform. It was one of the biggest headaches for us was dealing with the 2 gigabyte address space that our web servers had. and just trying to come up with workarounds to free up memory or track down memory leaks because we were so constrained in that address space. And
that's amazing to me when you say you're constrained by 2 gigabyte address space.
It is. I mean, but when you have thousands of applications that they all want to have their own caching behaviors and just pages getting loaded into the memory space, 2 gigs isn't a lot when you have a machine with 16 gigs of RAM that you want to use, and so
16 gigs of RAM are on your main machines.
Yeah. So I mean, so then x64 came along, and suddenly hey, this 2 gigabyte limit's gone, and it fixed a lot of problems for us. Performance-wise, on 32-bit, our IS app pools were just recycling, every 5 or 10 minutes because they were running out of memory, and then we went to 64-bit, and they stopped recycling.
What do you mean by cycling?
They would get to the point where the process would run out of memory, and we'd have to, recycle that process so that it wouldn't run out of memory.
So you'd have to stop the process and restart it, basically?
Well, I mean, IIS has mechanisms built in so that it'll gracefully recycle the process for you. But just, doing that every 5 minutes was so expensive that, it was a bad place to be where, they're just constantly recycling. So, just 64-bit gave us, our caches stayed built, longer, and just overall performance is better for customers. Just going to Microsoft.com, you can see, the pages are returned faster because the performance is better. So
very cool.
It's a pretty big, and that's kind of part of the early adoption stuff that we do. Right now we're working on Longhorn 64-bit and IS7, and so we typically adopt products a year or two ahead of the actual release so that we can go through and.
You're like a guinea pig, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You get all the what we call dog food before customers do, right?
Right,
So.
which is good, right? Because if we hit bugs on the scale that our sites are running at, then we're finding bugs and getting them fixed before the product releases for our customers, so that they don't have to deal with any of that pain.
Yeah. So far, how are you guys liking Windows Vista? Or actually, you're using Longhorn Server. It's still called Longhorn Server,
Yeah, it's
right?
still a Longhorn Server. It's got some pretty cool features in it. We're just starting to scratch the surface of it. I'm actually running Vista on my desktop.
Yeah, I saw the lovely grass.
And it's got some pretty good features. The UI is definitely coming along. So,
yeah.
As far as server goes, though, we're just starting to go through and figure out what the new features are in IS7 and
well, the server has the new networking stack, right?
Yeah.
So are you guys
exactly.
seeing performance improvements inside your data centers because of that?
Yeah, there's good stuff in the new TCP stack. Just the high-speed TCP, and they've fixed a lot of pieces of it where we had latency problems between our data centers. Locally here in the Puget Sound, going to our data centers in the Bay Area in California, that amount of latency was enough to cause problems in Server 2003.
Yeah.
That would reduce the amount of data we could push across that link, and just by moving those machines to the newer Longhorn builds, the NIC becomes the bottleneck now, and it was like a 10x improvement over what we could push over those latent links. So it opens a lot of doors actually to. Now we can start looking at hosting maybe over in Europe or maybe over in Asia.
I didn't quite believe the networking team when they were seeing up to 40 times improvement. So you're actually seeing a sizable improvement.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't push more than 10 megabits down to that data center, and that's on a link that has only like 30 milliseconds of latency. And now with the Longhorn builds, we're filling our gigabit NICs over that connection.
Wow.
So that would be that'd be 80 times improvement.
80x, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, from 10 to 800.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that alone, right,
Yeah,
is we're kind of like, okay, we want to in the Longhorn Beta 2 time frame, right? For some of our
That's why you
backend
guys aren't
applications.
complaining about my videos.
Exactly. So I mean, it's stuff that for our back-end applications that push a lot of data, we're kind of saying, okay, let's get these applications running Longhorn Beta 2. Like, we want this stuff now. So it's exciting.
Very cool. What kind of tools, or what's your work surface look like? What kind of tools do you use to get into the, Microsoft.com?
So, I mean, I could pull up the workbench, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Oh man.
Ooh, an error.
Yeah, I got some. This is a very recent build of Longhorn.
Yeah.
Today.
Oh, can you change your screens to 60 hertz? I'm sorry.
Sure. Yeah.
I just realized that you're flickering there. Yeah, it's monitor 60 hertz. Yeah.
60. Whoa.
Yeah, it'll give you headaches, but yeah, I'm still getting a pattern, but that's okay. We'll deal with that.
Okay. So this is our operations workbench, which we have in the operations team. We have our own tools team that builds this tool set for us to use, and it deals with bubbling up all of our eventing through MOM. There's a lot to it. Performance data, all of our monitoring applications. We can go through and see just to verify that all the applications are working on the different sites and servers. So I don't know really.
Hold on a second. Let me change my settings here on my camera and see if I can get. All right, we're back. It's
Okay.
It's a little bit better. Still got a little bit of a line, but that's cool.
Okay.
All right, so
So
what are
this
we
is
looking at here?
it just lets you go through kind of we can look at different properties. So if I punch in.
Now, what is it showing you here? Is this a map of the
Yeah, so
overall?
this is actually a monitoring view for www.microsoft.com, and it shows kind of each of the different clusters and servers and environments within that space. So then you can drill in to see, okay, on this.
Are we going to be allowed to show IP addresses publicly? I don't know if that's a security problem.
It's a good question.
We'll worry about that later.
These
But it'll be
are
something.
cluster addresses, right? Or no, these are servers.
Server addresses.
Probably not.
Okay.
So
we'll avoid showing the IP addresses. So I'll have to cut that part out.
Okay.
But yeah, so
it just lets us kind of drill in from a very high level to see, if a particular test is failing, and we can go in and look and see, okay, this test might be failing here, and these are all, different sets of tests against all the more important applications that are running on the site.
right.
That we have set up, and if one of these tests start failing, our help desk we'll get an alert that shows, hey, this test is failing on the server, and then they have a TSG to go through and
What's a TSG?
a troubleshooting guide just
Okay.
to go through and the engineers that run the sites.
Can you zoom out so I don't see IP addresses so I can show sort of what the visual map looks like?
Okay, sure.
Sorry.
Let's see. There we go.
Yeah. So you have a map here of what each of the clusters looks like.
Right.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
And you
and
can
then-
dive in on them, and if there's a problem with the cluster, does it show red or something?
Yeah, exactly. It'll go red, as well as there's an event queue that the help desk is watching, and they'll get an event, and then they'll have to do something with that action. And like I said, they'll have to go through the troubleshooting guide if there's any steps that they can take to fix the issue. If not, then they'll escalate to the engineer that's responsible for that site. And we have different engineers across all the properties, whether it's MSDN.microsoft.com or www.microsoft.com or search or any of the different properties. There's an engineer or multiple engineers depending on the size of the property.
Can you see individual machines and the condition of that machine, like temperature or anything like that?
We have terminal service access to all the servers in the data center, right? So if there is a problem, we can easily pull up a terminal server session and hop on that server and take a look at it, which is where we spend most of our time when we're debugging things. We'll actually have to go onto the server and attach a debugger to IIS or to whatever application we need to look at. But as far as
what's the weirdest problem you've ever seen?
oh, we've seen some pretty weird things.
The weirdest problem. That would be tough to come up with.
I had a friend who had a fire in a data center, and he was watching something like this, and he noticed the temperatures on his machines was going up rapidly, and going up from the top machine on down. And he called the data center and said, "We think there's a fire in your data center." And they said, "No, we're not on fire here." And sure enough, they were on fire, and the support desk didn't even know.
Oh man, no, we haven't had any fires. We've had
power outages,
massive power outages that caught us by surprise, caught everybody by surprise.
What does this map look like when you have a power outage? Does it just go all red all at one time? Or?
The whole thing is red.
Well, it'll actually, half of it should go red, right? Because we have it built in a way that we have multiple data centers, and that if one of the data centers does go offline, it's set up using third-party vendors like Akamai or Savvis to do live DNS failover. So if a data center does go offline, all the traffic will immediately fail over to the working data center. So on our larger properties, we have them scaled out that way to do that. So you'd see half of it go red, or a third of it go red, or depending on how many data centers the site's in.
Wow.
Probably our weirdest issues that we find are around attacks or hacking attempts that are really interesting to troubleshoot. Just random stuff, random people out there trying to poke holes, and they can cause some unknown behaviors that takes a while to troubleshoot. Either that or just random networking issues where some part of the world has just gone dark. They can't get to our site, and we have to figure out why. Is it China? It turns out some Chinese ISP was cutting off traffic to the U.S. or something crazy like that, where we have to troubleshoot with not a lot of information.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the attacks are definitely interesting. Like I think it was
how's the security of our software? Is it getting better? Are you noticing the attacks are going less and less?
Definitely. I mean, server SP1 was huge, and Longhorn's going to be even bigger.
SP2.
Yeah. So I mean,
so is your job getting easier? In other words, or
yes. It's definitely a lot easier.
At least the brute force stuff is not hitting us as much. Now it's more just individual people trying to have fun, make their name.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Like the blaster attack, right, where every Windows machine in the world was trying to hit our homepage. I mean, the scale of that was just, you don't see that anywhere else. When every Windows machine in the world at the same time is trying to.
Well, it wasn't everyone, but a lot of them.
A lot of them, right? Right. So, hundreds of thousands of machines all at once trying to get your homepage. So it's a lot of traffic.
That's our regular load. I think this is in the millions.
Millions.
Yeah. What else would we like to know about your job? I don't know. What else would what would people need to know about your job, or about what Microsoft.com looks like from the inside? What kinds of things have you learned, in terms of good web design or good web application principles, that might help other developers who are building web apps?
That's a good question.
You can do a lot of crazy stuff with the web applications.
Right.
Yeah. People are always getting, we don't control a lot of the content that gets shipped, and people are always trying to do new creative things, which are sometimes great and sometimes not really great, depending on what kind of dependencies they create in their applications. Are they going to have a dependency against some third-party site that may or may not be online 24 hours a day? How much data can they fit in an XML file is always kind of interesting too.
Is there a limit to that?
No, but we've seen people encoding like 18...
People try to find a limit?
18 megabyte Word document into an XML file, and it's like, why are you doing
trying
this?
to parse it on every request or something.
Right.
It's just insane where we start seeing performance issues against scale, and So I don't know. I mean, we're still ourselves just going through and trying to, put together a list of coding standards for our own developers that we kind of build as we run into problems.
What are the most common mistakes you find developers make?
A lot of problems maybe around caching, whether or not an application properly has good caching behaviors. If it's caching the right things, so the things that are hot and expiring things that are cold. Just not using too much of the cache, or just even implementing cache. Right, some apps hit the SQL server every time, or hit the make web service calls all the time. So really getting those caching behaviors tuned to not use a lot of memory and cache the hot stuff is really.
It's tricky. Because the environment is shared by so many thousand applications.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily understand that when they go to put their content out there. They think, hey, I'm the only person here. I can just cache whatever I want, and my application's going to rock. But they don't understand the impact of running in a shared environment like that. So we kind of have to educate them on best practices there. Make sure their application still rocks, but doesn't impact other people.
Yeah, I think the other big one too is exception handling, and just making sure that during the test phase that any applications that are thrown any exceptions that are thrown are just that, an exception, right? Because we've seen apps go out and they'll just be throwing tons of exceptions, which is really bad for performance. And so just working back with the developers to make sure that they understand how to attach a debugger and look at those exceptions and figure out why their applications are throwing exceptions.
Yeah. How do you test an app for load without putting it on the main servers? And do you see some things that just you can't test for, some cases that you can't test for?
Yeah, honestly, that's probably one of the most difficult issues to solve for us and for our development teams is reproducing real production load, the stuff that we see out there on the internet in a lab. It requires a lot of effort. It requires a lot of infrastructure, and frankly, it's really difficult to do. So they take their best swag at it. We give them some guidelines. We let them know what we are seeing currently in production as far as load, and they do it. And then we may hit some issues when it ships. I mean, that's a good probability. Just there's so much latency between here and China, and so many various clients, different versions of browsers, and all of that stuff. It's a pretty complex problem to solve. But I think we're making progress.
Yeah, there's a lot of just behaviors that happen out on the production site that are really difficult to get down into a test environment. Just all the different zombie clients that are hitting the site or hitting us with weird patterns, or just the variety of clients that are hitting us, from Joe's custom browser to Internet Explorer 7 to 5 to Firefox to any of the different combination of browsers that are hitting the site.
And you guys know actually how much market share each of those browsers has, right?
Oh yeah.
We won't even talk about that. But you guys get a lot more traffic than a lot of sites do. So, what can you tell me? What kinds of trends you're seeing out there?
I don't know what the latest numbers are. We actually have a separate BI team that's responsible for metrics, and there's a lot of links that are instrumented on the homepage. Or in different applications that when you click on a link, it tracks, your browser, and that all gets rolled up into a huge stats database. And we do have those metrics on what the browser share is. I don't know, exactly what those numbers are.
Yeah.
I do know, more recently, the homepage team has had to make considerations for Firefox, just because that share has grown. From what it used to be anyways.
Yeah. One of the myths, I guess, if you talk to people who aren't geeks or who aren't developers, one of the things you might hear is, oh, I'm scared of Microsoft tracking everything I do. Right? Is that possible for you guys to do?
Everything?
Yeah. I mean, considering we have 600 million or several hundred million machines out there, right?
Right.
What kind of data stores would you need to have? You guys have a pretty significant server farm,
right.
But
I mean,
it does have limitations as to what it can.
I mean, a lot of the data, right, is
Yeah.
rolled up to the point of, what's the browser share, right? There's no way of taking that data and uniquely identifying anyone with it. With the exception of some cases where there's where you're using register.microsoft.com and you have a profile set up, and in those cases, the data is anything that uses that data, PII data.
PII is
personally identifiable information.
Yeah.
There's just some really heavy guidelines about how that data is stored, what the security of it is, and then if you're an application that wants to consume that data, there's a huge list of guidelines that you have to go through to say, okay, what are you doing with this data? Why are you using it? How are you using it? And are you doing it in a secure way that that data is not going to get exposed? So we do a lot of work to make sure that any data that could identify someone is secure, and at the same time, the data that does get rolled up too is also
abstracted. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, certainly, when you're talking about that much data, it's impossible to track everybody. But when it comes down to it, if we need to track a hacker or somebody that's doing something malicious, we can watch their steps pretty closely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you don't know that person's name. You just know their IP address, and you can see somebody doing something in your machine.
Right. And they may be behind a proxy. There may be other kind of mitigating circumstances, but yeah, sometimes you can track them down to an internet cafe somewhere.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, we've had to do in the past, right, where we're trying to figure out, what this person's doing, and this IP address is causing problems, and oh, look, they're reading this KB article on this buffer overflow, or how to escalate their privileges, and just you kind of like they're using our own site to look up information on how to so.
It's a fun little game you guys have in the outside world.
There's some interesting.
If people find a problem with Microsoft.com, how do they report it to you guys?
Contact us.
And where's contact us?
It's an alias. Contact us at Microsoft.
Oh, contact us at Microsoft.com?
Yeah.
So that's just an email and.
Yeah, there's a third-party group that actually goes through, and they get a lot of interesting emails from people that are just letting us know, hey, there's a problem on the site, or hey, thank you for this, or flame mail towards Microsoft, and they sift through all that and sort out what's important and what needs to go to the different teams.
Now you guys don't run like MSN Search or Hotmail; those are separate.
Right. We're separate from MSN. So anything that's Microsoft.com, Windows Update, and the download stuff is.
Do you guys share best practices with those other teams? If they.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, we work pretty closely with a lot of other folks in their group, and for performance, and a lot of best practices. They actually host our equipment in their facilities, and so the data centers are technically run by MSN. So we're kind of a customer of theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what kind of code do you see? C#, VB, all the above?
All the above, yeah. VB.NET, C#, and ASP. Those are the primary.
JScript.
Yeah.
Are you guys testing out the new IIS yet?
We started. I mean, we're just starting to get it loaded up in the lab, just to get it set up and configured, and so we can start testing out the new features. But that's pretty much where we're.
What are you guys looking forward to on the most on there?
In 7, there's going to be quite a few things. Just centralized config, so that you don't have to manage all these metabases across thousands of servers anymore. You've got your one XML config file that manages your configuration, because that's been a problem. Just you have thousands of servers. How do you keep them all in sync? How do you deploy changes?
Yeah.
That's going to be a big one. There's
modularity.
Yeah, just
modularity of all their components, so you can pick and choose exactly what modules you want to load and write your own. That looks to be pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely their eventing and monitoring that they've implemented is going to be awesome, especially for our group troubleshooting.
Yeah.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and one of the other features we're hoping is that we want to start testing is the dynamic compression. I think there's going to be some. Previously, we haven't been able to run with dynamic compression because there's no caching to it. So every request that would come in, IS would have to compress the request on the fly, which is expensive, and I think in 7 they're looking at ways that they could add some layers of caching there to make that more performant. So that'll hopefully, you'll go to
reduce your
Microsoft.com.
bandwidth bill.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So how do you guys buy band? And, it's not like buying a cable modem.
Right. We have a lot of different peering relationships with all of the backbone providers, and we do a lot of. I mean, our bandwidth bill is driven by downloads, right?
Yeah.
By users downloading service packs or patches through Windows Update. That traffic alone drives our bandwidth bill, and so we work closely with Akamai, Savvis to cache those static files, and they drive a lot of the bandwidth too. And it's really a process of how much do we want to serve out of our local data centers, and what the price is versus how much do we want to cache with these third-party companies, and then just it's a business in itself of just managing that whole space and working with the peering providers, and coming up with estimates of, okay, this security push we're going to be doing 15 gigabits a second. Where can we handle this load, and
what's the most cost effective?
Right.
Yeah, a lot of it is it's our cost driver. So figuring out what the cheapest way to deliver these bits and stay under some peak boundary to ensure that our costs are low that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And to be honest, making sure we don't take down the internet when we ship something big like XPSP2 or something.
Wait until I start shooting it high def.
Bring it on.
Yeah. Well, we had the Sparkle video was a gigabyte in size, and it was downloaded. I don't know, 30 or 40,000 times. So
yeah.
Pretty big bandwidth bill.
I know.
I'm glad you guys are paying the bandwidth bill.
I mean, part of it too is we've actually gone back and worked with client teams like with the Windows Update client, right, to put a lot more controls into it and knobs that we can tune so that we can control our bandwidth bill by letting the client know, hey, come back in an hour, or come back at this time, and you'll be able to get your download, instead of having every Windows Update client come at once and get charged through the nose.
Yeah.
We can kind of maintain what our bandwidth levels are that way, and try and get, it comes down to how many clients can download versus what it's going to cost us to get the patch out over whatever period of time.
Yeah. What's the biggest file you guys have on your servers?
That I don't know. That would be a question for the download engineers. I mean, the biggest one we've pushed out through Windows Update, I think, was XPSP2, which was several hundred megabytes.
Megs, yeah.
So that was probably the biggest one.
They push out large, I think they've even pushed out
stuff.
Yeah, the MSDN stuff, like big virtual hard drives, for VPCs.
Yeah.
They pushed out. So you're talking several gigabytes in size.
Very cool.
I mean, the drive space that we have in the download boxes is several terabytes worth of storage. So there's a lot.
We got quite a bit up there. Nobody's complaining about that either. Which is
that might change.
What the heck? Who the heck is taking up all our space?
Somehow hard drive sizes just continue to increase. So the cost for doing that is not as great, but eventually we're going to have some kind of limitation hit, I'm sure, at least for making sure all of our data is backed up, or that we have. Because it kind of gets painful when we start having to build out 83 terabyte download servers.
Yeah.
That's something else in IIS7 that we're looking forward to, is possibility of using UNC for our content, so we can store it on just a back-end file server and serve it that way.
A lot of caching improvements in 7 that they're trying to do to make that a really scalable and performant feature.
Yeah. How do are you guys saving any historical data of the website? Because once you remove bits from a server, it's gone, and that's like history. It's not, and that's one thing. Like newspapers have stored all their copies all the way back to 200 years.
Right.
You can go and read the New York Times from 150 years ago, and you can't go back to Microsoft.com and see the 1997 version of Microsoft.com, right? So.
Actually,
I know. I mean, the homepage, we've kept different, revs of the homepage and stuff. But there's a lot of stuff out there that is really old, and so we're trying to come up with an archiving strategy for a lot of it, just to go through and figure out what's not getting hit anymore, and then ship it off to an archive site.
Yeah.
But I mean, like any site, we have tape backups and stuff that go back quite a ways too, right? So that data's it's still there and around.
Now, the trend in this industry is to move more towards services. You see what our friends Google are doing, or Salesforce.com, or any of those things, and they're serving out full applications through their web infrastructure. Are you guys getting more pressure to do that kind of stuff and keep up with the?
We certainly have a growing number of web services. A lot of it's used on our back end. So our front end web servers are talking to back end web services to do various things. It's continually growing. I don't know that it's.
What I'm trying to get at
like RSS feeds and stuff. We've got some
feeds,
applications that want to start doing that, and I think actually the new version of the Windows Update is a web service that the Windows Update clients hit over the internet.
Yeah.
When they come to check to get their XML manifest to say, hey, are there any new updates? It's just a web service call over the internet. So.
Yeah. I'm just wondering how your jobs are going to change over the next few years. As imagine if Office someday said, "Hey, we're going to ship a web version of Office," and and think about that, right? That's going to change your jobs and the skills you're going to need and the kinds of data
yes
centers.
And no, I mean when it comes down to it, a web service is still a web server, serving more bits generally, but it's still basic functionality.
There's a client and an IIS server with some application on it serving bits.
Yeah.
And so it might change it slightly.
It's a heavier web page.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Essentially, it's a heavier web page. They do more posts than gets and stuff like that, but the behavior's still the same. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Virtual Earth isn't on your sites. You're just anything Microsoft.com / Windows Media /
MSDN, search.microsoft.com support.
Support, Windows Media.
WindowsMedia.com is us too.
What's the most visited subsite? That's a good question.
China.
Really? Microsoft.com / China.
That gets more traffic than the homepage.
Really?
Yeah.
It used to, anyways. I'm not sure if that's
how many billions of people there. 1 point something
right,
billion.
and they, in Internet Explorer, right? You get their default page goes to Microsoft.com / China.
Wow.
You get it gets a lot of traffic. Outside of just www, though, MSDN is probably
Windows Media.
Windows Media, right?
Yeah.
WindowsMedia.com.
Very cool.
They're very busy.
Yeah. Yeah, us guys with camcorders.
It's the future. It is, multimedia, all kinds of, games, whether it's games, movies, some kind of entertainment.
Yeah.
Streaming.
That's
live streaming.
Is the Xbox site going up in traffic lately?
Oh man. Can't wait for that.
Yeah.
360.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, thanks for spending a little bit of time with me and showing me your world and talking about debugging Microsoft.com.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.